folks. Thanks for tuning in for another Cruise with Smooth. Hope y'all are doing okay today. I tell you, the conversations... Whoa, big piece of farm equipment heading my way. That we are having about coronavirus and the lockdowns and everything else that is going on at present right now, in my opinion, are the dumbest possible ones. Okay. Before I get into that, like, share, comment, subscribe, notification bell if you want to know when new stuff goes up. But in my opinion, the conversations that we're having are the dumbest possible ones. And it's not due to the nature of the people that are the experts in these fields. It's due to, in my opinion, it's due to the nature of the way media is set up. And I'm not picking out left-wing or right-wing media. All of it is, unless you get into more long-form podcasts and things like that. I've listened to a lot of interviews where people have talked about going on various news shows, and the one complaint is you have the time constraints of the programming format on, cable news networks. You've got so many minutes to do all this stuff, to have your sting set up for the next segment, and then get out for a commercial break. It's not set up to be able to deliver well-nuanced thought, because, okay, if I'm going on say I've got a point to make that's going to take me 15 minutes to get through it. Nothing wrong with having a very complex, in-depth, and nuanced opinion on anything that might take a few minutes to get through. But on a 5 to 7 minute long interview, you've got to rush through it, and you've got to fight the programming format. You're talking over people who might have questions of you, which isn't a bad thing in and of itself. And then when you come back, you're off the panel, or it's on to another topic of discussion. So the programming format hasn't given us the best possible way to discuss these things. It's what's the most ratings grabbing thing that you can say in these 10 to 12 minutes to drive our ratings up before we go to a commercial break. And give you a case in point in that, about how the television network interview process works. Okay, I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan. And if you listen to 90 to 95% of the things that he says, he sounds like a crazy old communist. Or crazy old socialist, if you prefer that label better. For Pete's sake, people. Another piece of big farm equipment, guy pulled off the side of the road, no one would pass him. So now we're stuck. Awesome. Okay. But in my opinion, Bernie Sanders sounds like a crazy old communist or crazy old socialist, whatever label you prefer. But if you listen to him on the debate stage, you listen to him on the news, you listen to him here or there, he sounds kind of nutty. About about a year ago now, I don't know exactly when, he did a long-form interview with Joe Rogan. And while I disagreed with his take on what should be done in society, what in the world? While I disagree with his take on what should be done in the world, he sounded way more palatable on Joe Rogan than he did on any cable news network or mainstream media source. I will say that. Because he wasn't up against the clock. Joe Rogan, his ran shows up to 5 hours long. So there was no rushing to get this, that, or the other thought in before the commercial break or someone interrupting. And Joe Rogan, he does interrupt his guests sometime, but mainly it's to slow them down because everybody's so used to fighting to get that 30-second uninterrupted click in before. And now to our sponsors, or someone interrupts in the panel. So they're so used to trying to get that 30-second perfect thought in, and so every time he interrupts them, a lot of time it's not, hey, I'm interrupting and I want to say this. It's, hey, I'm interrupting, I want to slow you down and have you clarify that, or explain that a little better for some of our viewers that may not be familiar with you. I love that about Rogan. But I think that due to all that, that's why we're having the dumbest possible discussion about coronavirus. I seen a meme the other day. One of those overlapping pie charts, I forget what they're called. I think it's a Venn diagram. 3 of them. Concerned about the death toll of coronavirus. Concerned about the economic impact of shutting down the economy indefinitely. Concerned about a tyrannical runaway government due to coronavirus. I am square in the middle of all that. Time will tell if I'm right in this or not. Personally, I think that the death toll estimates were vastly oversold. I can't prove that right now. The data is not out there to prove that. So, I could be right, I could be wrong. But I think that when all the data sets are in, when everything is figured out, that there's a distinct possibility throughout the majority of the country, with very few big city exceptions, that this was an oversold overreaction. I could be wrong. In smaller areas, a lot of hospitals are having to lay off staff because the governors of various states put an end to elective medical procedures, joint replacements, cosmetic surgery, non-life-saving surgeries. And you can call that whatever you want, whatever kind of surgery it ends up being, but if it was deemed non-elective or non-life-saving, it didn't happen. And a lot of these hospitals did not get hit with the coronavirus load that was originally forecast in their area. And so you've got hospitals sitting at 50% or less capacity in a lot of places. And they've got doctors and nurses on furlough until they can resume normal activities. So I think that this has been oversold in a lot of locations. I realize New York's terrible, and I feel sorry for the people there. I also think that the governor of New York and the mayor of New York City greatly mismanaged it. my opinion. So, I think that there needs to be a intelligent discussion about all this, not along partisan lines, but along scientific fact and true numbers and verifiable data. Okay, I can give you a list of facts concerning coronavirus right now. I don't know to what degree, but I do know that suicides are up. I know that domestic violence is up. I know that substance abuse of all kinds, both legal and illegal, in whatever state you happen to be in, is up. I know that depression is up. Personally, I know that. A family member works for the school system in our area, and they got laid off before I did, I believe. They got laid off in early March in our area. The schools did. And they had another family member working, single mother with kids, who lost daycare due to various shutdowns, and this single mother family member was an essential worker. Managed to get out of work under the CARES Act due to some pre-existing conditions in her house. But anyway, what was very telling to me is you have someone that, granted, they didn't struggle financially. The school system guaranteed the income, but you had someone all of a sudden out of work, all of a sudden burdened with babysitting because there was no other daycare options, and depression set in rapidly. So I know that depression is up. I know that anxiety is up. And here's my question, and I don't know if there's data out there to answer this, but it's my question. Okay, the perceived moral high ground here is we'll do whatever we can to save one life from Mayor Cuomo. And that's not okay, it's a laudable goal, but I don't think it's realistic due to the nature of this virus. And okay, if you've got to put 10,000 people out of work, even more than that in New York City, if you've got to put 50,000 people out of work, have them struggle to keep their lights on, put food on the table, deal with serious anxiety and depression in half of them, suicide rates going up. I don't know what the countervailing argument is where that one life is worth everything. Not trying to sound callous or apathetic, but when you've got to make policy decisions, that's what you've got to look at. One of the things that they look at is life years lost versus quality life years. So, okay, if you had someone that was 84 that died of coronavirus, tragic, yes. Sad, yes. But they had already reached life expectancy. Okay. If you have someone that's 30, a small business owner, out of work, can't get their paperwork through fast enough, and they put a bullet through their head, you've lost 50 quality life years. a small business and likely a working parent. So what's the moral decision there? I don't know. I don't have the answer, but those are the discussions that we need to have, and those are discussions we need to figure out. In my opinion, it shouldn't be most lives saved from coronavirus, because if that's the case, we all need to go back into lockdown now and indefinitely. There needs to be no essential work for 14 days. And people need to tough it out a little bit until the virus, everyone that has the virus has transmitted it to everybody in their house and it's died. That's what we need to do if we're going to make the truly ultimate kill coronavirus move. Facts. Okay? But that being unrealistic and unattainable, in my opinion, what we need to do is we need to focus on saving the most lives possible, period, while ensuring the highest quality of life for everybody. Okay, there's going to be a curve where if you reopened everything and everybody went back to work tomorrow and everything was exactly the way it was 3 months ago, the substance abuse, alcohol abuse, and rates of other terrible things that have happened as a result of the lockdown will probably fall off rapidly. And that's fine. And that's what you'd expect to have happen. But coronavirus deaths would probably ramp up pretty quickly. And then they'd fall off again because you'd reach herd immunity. Okay, so that's what would happen. Now, and also there's a possibility in certain areas of overwhelming medical capacity. Okay, that's a possibility. Now, in that same scenario, if you lock everything down till coronavirus is done, you're going to have increased rates of the side effects of lockdown. Okay, so neither one of those is what we want. We want something in the middle where you get right as far as you can go without a drastic uptick in coronavirus deaths, but also as far as you can go to minimize the side effects of coronavirus societally, not medically, societally. That's where we want to be, is right there where those two curves meet before they skyrocket in either direction, if they even do. And I don't know that happens anywhere on those two curves. But if they do, that's where we need to be, is in the middle. Because you've reduced the societal damage from coronavirus, the alcoholism, the domestic violence, the suicide, the depression. And also there's other medical concerns from this. People are not receiving routine medical care. People are running behind. People are not getting normal vaccinations. People are not getting this, that, and the other done. People are missing out on chemotherapy treatments. People are missing out on a lot of stuff that they normally would go to. And so there's likely to be a lot of deaths from coronavirus indirectly, medically, not suicide. Where, well, I didn't want to go to the doctor because I was scared of catching coronavirus, so I stayed home and I died. That's likely to happen to a lot of people. So, I can see the point of all this, but we don't have these discussions. We have the most dumb possible discussion on most news networks. Especially if it's a discussion panel where you bring on experts and you're trying to get their information, because then one expert will start talking over the other. I understand that if you had an economist, he's going to look at the economy and say, we need to reopen today to save the economy. He's right. Okay? You can also have a epidemiologist who looks at his data and says, we need to stay in and crush this thing. He's right too, in his respective field. Okay? So, two things can be right at once without anyone lying to further their point of view. But I just think that we need to have the discussion where where do we save the most lives, period, not where do we save the most lives from coronavirus, and where do we preserve the what decisions and policies do we put in place where the most people live the best lives possible? That's where we need to have our discussion. Because, and I don't know all the numbers, I'm sure that the rates of depression have outpaced coronavirus deaths. Another thing that's not being talked about is that the majority of coronavirus deaths in New York were in nursing homes and among the elderly. So it's tragic when grandma dies, yes. I've lost all my grandparents. I grieved every one of them. It's tragic, but shouldn't we be splitting up the population and tranching them like they did in Sweden? Everyone that was high risk was advised to stay in and socially distance and stay away from people. It was made, if you were working out your last few years before retirement, they made it possible for you to collect money and stay afloat financially. Okay, that's great. Everybody else was kind of allowed to go to work and do their things. They did socially distance in restaurants. They suggested masks. They made all the risk factors and whatnot known, but they didn't shut everything down. So we're just having the dumbest possible discussion and the dumbest possible reactions to all this. But one of the things that I've said in an earlier show, I don't remember which one, is that government is very inept and you don't want them in charge. You want government in charge of as little as possible. So anyway, I've rambled on long enough. I hope y'all are having a good enough day. Stay safe. Thanks for tuning in for another Cruise with Smooth. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and notification bell if you want to know when stuff goes up. See y'all next time.